Hey everyone, welcome to Content with Stefan. I'm Stefan, and today we're going to be talking about the really difficult question of balancing how frequently you post while also maintaining content quality. I'm excited to talk about this, as I always am, and without further ado, let's dive right in. So this conversation topic actually came from a response to one of my LinkedIn posts. I had posted on LinkedIn saying, I'm thinking of doing these videos. What are your content challenges? What would you want to see? And I had someone reach out to me privately saying, all these blogs tell me that I need to be posting all the time, at least weekly. I need to be always on, always building, always creating. And one very, very famous content creator advocates for this as well, and has even gone as far as to say that quality doesn't matter because, in a lifetime of work, you'll eventually get some hits. And while I think there's some logic to that of course you produce better things when you produce more. There's just a science to show that the more you produce, the better chance of a hit you have. But at the same time, especially if you're doing this from a business perspective, you can't be putting out crap. You can't be putting out content that is complete nonsense or is untrue, especially if you are in the knowledge game in any way, which I'd say most of us are. This is a tough balance because obviously if you are a content marketer, this is your full-time job, but you also have limits. And then if you're an entrepreneur, you have 1,000,001 things on your plate. You can't be focusing on content 24/7 just for the sake of producing this massive audience, because otherwise you're not actually going to be able to do the work you need to do to keep your business alive. I wanted to share 5 strategies that have really helped me thinking about my own content capacity, as well as what I've seen work for some of my clients over the years. I want to start by acknowledging that best-in-class advice of publishing at least once a week I've seen hold water. If you wait too long in between publishing content, people start to question why they signed up for something or what you're really talking about. The idea of publishing net new all the time can be absolutely exhausting, especially if you're not a creator by nature. If this is difficult work for you to sit down and write a blog post or to record a vlog or something like that, it can be plainly exhausting and really not helpful, because if you are exhausted, you're not going to be able to do your other work to the highest quality you need to, and you're not going to be able to do this content work to the highest quality that you need to. So what I want to suggest is thinking about ways to communicate out what is already created instead of focusing on net new creation yourself. So 2 key ways to do that. You can either reshare some of your own content with a different perspective, perhaps an evolution if the blog is a little bit older, perhaps a new piece of information that reinforces or even challenges what you've already said, engaging in that conversation. Or you can curate other people's information. So if you have a newsletter where you're striving to send out fresh content all the time, you can give yourself a little bit of a break every now and again by curating other people's information on the topic. If you're going to go down this route, I recommend not picking something that is the exact same as yours. If you have a top 5 tips for ABC article, don't share someone else's top 6 tips for ABC, because that could make you lose a little bit of credibility. But you could share a more philosophical approach to ABC, or a very tactical approach if you took the philosophical approach, thinking about the broader content ecosystem and how you can communicate with your audience without forcing yourself to have to create content all the time. The next strategy is one of my personal favorites, to be honest, and it's repurposing. The idea that you have to post completely fresh content on every platform all the time is, in my opinion, useless. And I really do mean that, because when you think about the audiences on platforms, you likely have a Venn diagram of audience, meaning yes, there's going to be some overlap, of course, but by and large, you'll be reaching net new people. Now, you might have to change the format, since, for instance, you can publish significantly longer on LinkedIn than on Twitter, but don't worry about repurposing in order to keep the audience satiated, for lack of a better term. The other side of repurposing is not just taking the exact same thing, but also creating a bit more of an ecosystem around your point. So what I mean by that is I had a LinkedIn post saying, I'm thinking of doing content videos. What do you want to know? I could have potentially taken that exact topic, done just a little bit more research, and maybe made an infographic on the top 5 topics that people want to know about in content marketing, as asked by me on my social media feed, as well as a little bit of Googling that I did, making sure, of course, that the sources are credible. But you can take the core idea and repurpose it out. Or I could take that LinkedIn, or actually initially tweet, not LinkedIn post, and consider turning it into a little bit more of an explanatory blog. So instead of just saying, I'm thinking about it, I can explain why I'm thinking about it and explain that when I was looking for information, I didn't often find practically useful tips based on experience. It was general best practices, and that's not what I want to do here. I want to grow based only on what real people are facing, real challenges right now. So there are ways to expand and then also contract. If you have that blog post, maybe you can turn it into a social media post. But the idea of repurposing and then upcycling, to use a European term, can save you a lot of time and still give the appearance of freshness and newness across your social platforms. The other thing to think about is that each platform is going to have a tone to it that interacts with your brand and how you communicate with the world. So there's the obvious, the structural differences. Instagram is a picture, Facebook is a more private community, LinkedIn is about professional connections, Twitter is short, snippy tweets. But it's also the dominant communities on those platforms that might change how you interact. Using myself as an example, I tweet a lot about tech, whereas on LinkedIn, I keep it a little bit more businessy, and on Instagram, I take too many selfies, but that's beside the point. Think about how that works for you and your brand as well, because the expectations of how often you communicate and how often you create could be very different depending on the platforms you use, and given their structures, could actually give you an opportunity to break down one piece of created content into multiple different ways of engaging and ways of, again, communicating, not just creating. This third strategy kind of takes the first two, thinking about different ways to communicate and repurposing, and engages it across the brand of your platform. So if you're very active on LinkedIn, then Twitter, you can probably do something a little bit differently and find a new well of easy engagement that perhaps you hadn't tapped before. The fourth strategy or thing to think about is actually where your audience lives and their expectations of you. Twitter is well known as something that you have to communicate relatively frequently, whether that's a retweet, a like, a comment, or a net new tweet. LinkedIn might be maybe once every day or so. It's a lot slower and more focused on the content quality or perceived content quality of the post. You don't always have to do the same level of engagement. And in fact, it could even be harmful. If you're posting 6-7 times on Twitter, that's considered relatively normal. You'll probably be okay. You probably won't bother too many people. If you're posting 6 to 7 times a day on LinkedIn, that could be a problem. So think about the path of least resistance. What are the platforms asking you to contribute? And don't feel obligated to do much more than that, at least at the start, while you're building up your capacity. The other thing to think about is either shutting off entirely or just putting on autopilot the platforms that you kind of have to exist on, but don't really generate anything from. So if your audience is solely on LinkedIn, then perhaps your Twitter is more about existing and occasional tweeting. And you can even put in your bio, I'm more active on LinkedIn if that works for your personal brand, or focus a lot of your content on Twitter on driving people to your LinkedIn page. So think about that too, where are you just doing a bit too much from an ROI perspective? If it's all working for you and it's all generating this massive engagement and conversion that you want, then maybe the solution is to hire someone to manage it. But if you're not getting the types of conversion that you want, maybe the solution is to put one on autopilot, or honestly even shut it off for the time being while you focus on what actually is working for you. The final tip that I want to share with you is the idea of consistency, then frequency. So instead of saying, oh God, all this advice is telling me I have to publish at least once a week or twice a week, and then you do that for 3 weeks and you get tired and then you stop and then it crashes. Look at what you can honestly commit to. And I'll use myself as an example. I wanted to get back on Twitter. I've had Twitter for 10 years, but I was never super active until relatively recently. And I thought to myself, like, what can I actually commit to? Because the idea of scheduling 4 to 5 tweets a day sounds miserable. So I said, okay, I can do one a day. Scheduled it for 1 p.m. And for the most part, most days, there's a tweet from me at 1 p.m. Now, that's evolved a little bit as I've gotten more involved in conversations on Twitter and I've started responding more and maybe scheduling less. But by and large, that's what worked for me. People kind of knew to expect a tweet from me. I could engage. I trained myself where I'm like, all right, I'm logging onto Twitter. And then I've kind of tweaked from there. I don't really post as much on weekends now, or if I do, it's more off the cuff. I focus a little bit more on scrolling through the feed and maybe having a conversation with someone instead of just publishing outward. But think about your consistency first. So all these best practices are a great rule of thumb. They're a great place to start and say, can I earnestly do that? And if not, figure out what you can do, because consistency will train not only your audience, but also yourself. It will start to give you a bit of energy towards creation because there's that payoff of I'm done, I've accomplished it, I'm one a day and I've done it, and you feel happy, and eventually you start to want more, and then you can think about frequency. Another side note quickly about those best practices is that they may completely not work for you. You know, if you are writing really in-depth content or creating really in-depth content, then weekly might not work, and your audience might not want that. So maybe it is the case of a bi-weekly, incredibly in-depth conversation. Now, of course, there's a floor. There's a minimum quality that you need to hit for your brand and your tone, and some brands can get away with a little bit lower, others are going to need a little bit higher. That's a decision you need to make for yourself. But if you're focused on an incredibly high level of quality, an audience that wants that level of quality understands that they may not get it all the time. Think about what the audience really, really expects. And if you are concerned, you can even ask them and then go from there. Thank you all for watching this video. It was great to have you. This is Lord Arthur Cuddlesworth. He just woke up from a nap, so he's not a happy camper right now. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. It would be amazing to have you in the community. And if you have any questions about content, please leave a comment. I'd be really happy to take those comments and turn them into another video. Thanks again for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.